7, we'll call it. And I'd like to welcome you. We'll commence this meeting of the Evanston Public Library Board of Trustees at said time. I would like to first welcome everybody to our new space, apparently. We've had a lot of meetings down here, and given the issues of the day, I anticipate that most, if not all, of our future meetings will take place in this room. We've outgrown, as we found on August 4th, we've outgrown the boardroom upstairs. So this will be our default location unless posted otherwise on the meeting notices. So more room to breathe out and let our voices be heard. So I would like to start. Susan, would you do a roll call?
Okay. I'm not going to do an alphabetical order.
That's fine.
Sharon Arsenault. Here. Donna Gerson.
Here.
Lynette Murphy. Diane Dee Allen Jacoby. Here. Sharon. Mildred, we have 2 new members of the board. Are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, Mildred.
Here.
Gail Bush. And we have 2 staff people. And Susan Stone is absent.
Okay, I'd like to welcome Mildred Harris and Sharon Arsenault as our 2 newest board members whose terms began the 1st of this month. Welcome. And I know that Susan met Ms. Harris this afternoon.
Both of them.
Both of them.
We had a quick intro to our great board in the library. They are going to be great additions.
I agree. You picked a great time to join the library. So welcome to both of you, and we will move along through our agenda. We have had a lot of meetings and a lot of discussions over the past month and a half. It's been quite a month and a half. I know that I've barely had time to breathe. So to that end, we have approval of minutes from 4 meetings to approve, and I trust that everybody has had a chance to review all of them. The meeting on July 1st, then we moved to on July 21st. I'm sorry. Time is fading away on me. Our meeting on July 21st, in which the special meeting on August 4th was called. And then we did do notes, although there were no actionable votable items at our meetings, our public forums, on August 28th and September 1st, respectively. So we need approval of those minutes.
I move approval of the minutes of July 21st.
Okay, I will second. Okay. All in favor of approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting on July 21st? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Our special board meeting on August 4th. What was it?
I had a change.
You have a change.
Okay, on the first page of those minutes, under discussion of library funding model, first paragraph says that Trustee Gail Bush made a motion, etc., and Diane Jacoby seconded the motion. Then it says, which is so, that I offered a substitute motion to adopt the library funding model for fiscal year 2012. Then it says there was no second. That is incorrect. The chair ruled that the motion of Gail Bush had precedence and that we would vote on that motion. And that's what happened.
Okay.
So I would like the minutes to show that.
Because there already was a motion on the table, is that?
Well, you know, that was the ruling of the chair, and that's what we did. We voted on Gail Bush's motion.
Okay. Well, the ruling was there because it was based on no second, so we have a misunderstanding. We'll accept the...
There was no request for a second. The ruling came before there was any
And then after there was no second. So we will accept the minutes as amended. Yeah.
That after the sentence where it says trustee Donna Gerson offers a substitute motion, it should say the chair rules that the motion of trustee Gail Bush took priority, precedence.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take the minutes as amended. The chair ruled that hearing no second. So we'll take the minutes as amended. But that's fine. We accept the minutes. So we need to vote to accept the minutes from the August 4th meeting as amended by trustee Gerson.
I make a motion that we accept the amended minute for the special board meeting on August 4th.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign? Okay, so now we have our public forums. These were great discussions, and they were good meetings, but there were no votable, actionable items. But because we did have a quorum of the board at both meetings, I believe we had 5 trustees at each meeting, so we did do minutes, just to have a record of the meeting. So we'll take each forum and approve the minutes as presented. So we have the first forum on August 28th. Get a chance to review those minutes. Pardon?
I move approval.
Okay. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, now we have our final forum, which was September 1st at Fleetwood Jourdain. The first forum, by the way, was in this room. Those minutes, everybody has had a chance to take a good look at those. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the forum on September 1st. Seconded by Gail Bush. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Susan seconded. Susan, you seconded that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right. Information. Mary, as our packets.
Christopher, citizen comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always look forward to citizen comment. Getting used to this space myself.
Okay.
Susan has the names for citizen comment. So what we'll do, Susan, we have 15 minutes for citizen comment.
And we have 5 names.
We have 5 names.
Right.
So rules, please, Mrs. Newman.
3 minutes max. 15 divided by 3 will do. Okay, first up is Mike Vasilko.
Where do you want that to take place?
Chris, do you want to use the mic?
This
or-
place is fully set.
Yeah.
Is on?
Okay, so we can alternate as well.
I'm here tonight. First of all, my name is Mike Vasilko, 2728 Reese. I'm here tonight to lower my rhetoric and apologize for what may have been an overreaction on my part regarding your vote at the August 4th meeting. To explain briefly, I'd always been a fan of the Evanston library system, and my change of demeanor tonight is largely due to Diane's taking part last night to participate in the first community budget workshop. I saw Diane's participation as a significant gesture. Understand that there are a number of us in the community who have worked hard for several years to voice opposition to ever-increasing taxes in our town, in our county, and our state. I was finally feeling as though my voice and the voices of others were being heard at City Hall. I even felt there was a glimmer of hope at Cook County when, just like the game Whack-A-Mole, another public taxing body popped up. My position is that I'm against any new taxes for any kind, for any purpose, until Evanston has an economic development plan in place that provides for a reliable new source of revenue other than the property taxpayers. I've devoted a lot of time and resources to developing an economic development plan that illustrates at least one scenario that will generate substantial new revenue for Evanston. The library announcement that you made in August, as hopefully you can understand and imagine, took me by surprise. I'm going to leave you just a few pages of that economic development proposal that hopefully you'll have a moment to take a look at it, just to understand the effort put forth. Fully implemented, this proposal would generate tens, if not millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars of tax revenue, more than enough to contribute handsomely to the library system. So I hope you'll just take a moment to, at your leisure, to consider it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next is Jim Hughes.
I made a short PowerPoint presentation and made copies for everybody.
Oh,
Citizen comment with a PowerPoint presentation.
well, we're about to.
It's all happening so fast.
I hope to do this in 3 minutes, so it's all hope you have a copy. Skip to the next one.
Thank you.
Bill?
Are you going to move on in 3 minutes?
My name is,
We're still working out this new room thing, so.
yes, they can see.
Can you see this?
Yes.
My name is Jim Hughes. In disclosure, I'm Evanston Public Library Friends, I'm the director. And I live here in Evanston for 30 plus years at 2518 Hartzell. That's my contact info. We looked at the data for Evanston Public Library going back to 2004. That's a 72-column spreadsheet that we shrank down slightly. You can read that.
Can you read that?
You can do this better than I can.
I can do my reading glasses on.
Okay. We had 72 months of service data in a spreadsheet. So we looked at growth across the library using IMLS data and our own internal data. And we saw a very flat trend until 2008, 9, and 10, which it really took off. Looking at that particular year set, 8, 9, 9, 10, circulation grew 6.5% and 6.63%, a total of 13%. 13 or 14% over the last 10 years occurred in the last 2 to 3 years. Same thing with visits. The size of the library relative to its branches and its main. The main is circulation, 838,000. The branches are 166,000. When you look at visits, the main is 523,000, and the branches are 157,000. Collectively, the branches represent between 17 and 23% of the library operation. When you look at growth over the last 3 years, this changes. In circulation, the total growth at Maine was 58,000. For the branches was 50,000. 46% of the growth in the library system came in the branches in the last 3 years. In terms of visits, it's even more striking. The Maine grew 12,000. The branches grew 36,128. Now, these are the library numbers, they're not ours. So we're using those numbers, and we're trying very carefully to use them correctly. If you look at the impact on the branches on spending, the line that's in red represents the percent the branches are of the total library spending, 9.5%. Yet what they deliver is 17% of the circulation, 23% of the visits, 39% of the summer reading program, 46% of circulation growth, and 75% of the growth in visits in the last 3 years. Removing the branches would result, and these are my hypothesis slides, these are not dated, this is Jim Hughes, a significant drop in total library usage and growth today with the circulation of 166,000 and visits of 157,000, one might speculate that half that would go away. That would be a drop of 8.5 to 11.5% for the total library in circulation and visits. A decrease in retail sales along Central and Main, and a drop in sales tax revenue. Maybe not easy to see, but we're sure if sales drop, sales tax revenue will drop. We're aware that many of our users up near the North Branch also use the Wilmette Library. So we figure some of that sales revenue will move with those patrons. Added cost for a patron to use the main library. 1 2-hour visit per week, a mother with 2 children visiting the library will spend an additional $78 annually for parking, or $234 using the CTA. That's for just one fare, or $457 in cab fare. And a complete loss of access to those who have no alternative. Thank you.
Barry Lundy, please.
Hi, my name is Laurie Levy. I live in Evanston on Ashland Avenue, and I am a big supporter of the South Branch. And my children were homeschooled, and I spent a lot of time there. I'm sad to see some of the days have disappeared, but also I feel that both the South and the West Side are being underserved, and in terms of the time available. One of the parts I tried to play is bring books that are left over from the library here to the Robert Crown, and they had these twirlers there, and I restock them every month, and they're gone. I mean, it's there to be taken. The books are to be taken. I want to applaud the library for putting up the reading stop that was in Dempster Dodge Plaza, and I think it's a great first step, but it's not enough, and I think it's time to take a serious foray into the West Side, whether it's at Robert Crown or someplace, even if it's a temporary place for the library. I had one of those great moments today. I went to the South Branch to drop stuff off, and in the other room, as they opened, there were all of these people who had come over from Park School in wheelchairs, and it was a reading program that's there every Wednesday. And I'll be honest with you, that ain't going to happen in this building. It's only going to be there. It's because the Park School is on Main Street and they come over. I think it's important for us to really get serious and find a new South Branch, as this one is no longer serving us for the future, and it serves us well for these programs, but I think we have to start thinking of that and also thinking of an alternative on the West Side. Thank you very much. I think the branch libraries have to stay.
Ellen Newcomer.
I ceded to Jim. I can't do as well as he did.
Okay. Laurie Keenan.
I didn't realize that I am part of the Friends report, so I didn't mean to sign up.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Information from the packet. Yeah, for your review, information including copies of numerous news pieces about what's happened over the past couple of months and letters and et cetera. So for your review. So we're going to move on on August 4th. The board requested to library staff to prepare a series of budget scenarios for FY11. I'm skipping all around this agenda, am I not? My apologies. Just getting used to this space. To my right is our liaison to the Evanston Public Library Friends, Donna Gerson, and we're going to do a library friend. We'll have our library friends report now. So, Donna.
And I'll ask Laurie. She'll
Okay.
present it.
I understand there's a PowerPoint as well with the friends report today.
Michael and I were both going to present for the Friends.
Okay. So first Michael, then you, Laurie, or, okay. Did you have a proposal?
No, okay, no. Just have my scribbles.
The boardroom upstairs is much cozier.
Get on the freeway. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Keenan. I am a member of the board of directors of... For those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Cannon, and I am a member of the Evanston Public Library Friends, and I was honored to be chosen to sit on the Sustainable Funding Task Force. My discussion tonight will be brief. I want to salute the board for taking the brave action that it did in invoking the library fund model of governance. We hope that you have been encouraged and moved by the 3,000 members of the Friends that have joined the Friends in the last 6 months. We hope you've been encouraged and moved by the spontaneous show of support shown to you on Monday. All we did was send out an email for people to speak, and the support that was shown to you on Monday was spontaneous, unplanned, and genuine. We hope that you have been encouraged and moved by the fact that the 2 newspapers in town have written editorials which fully embrace the exercise of your state rights. We have often been told that this battle that we've been fighting is an exercise in participatory democracy, and in some respects that's true. But there's also part of democracy where various divisions of government need to respect each other. And in this respect, the fund is premised on your invocation of state law. And we believe, based on the work that we have done and the work that the task force did, that the Library Act says what it says. And I will get to that in a moment. But as you contemplate and deliberate what you are going to be doing in the next several months, having embraced this model of governance, the resolution that was passed was with respect not just to the branches, but the entire Evanston Public Library system. And based on this model of governance that you have chosen, you have the power to set the levy, you have the right to control the budget, and the city's ordinance as it currently stands recognizes the primacy of state law. Whether this new ordinance is truly a peace offering or something else, this ordinance, in my humble opinion, seeks to reverse all that you have done, all that the public has done, and seeks to turn the Library Act and case law interpreting the Library Act on its head. So as you deliberate these hard choices that you're going to be thinking about and debating about tonight and in the next several months, it is the Friends' belief, based on the work that we have all done together, that you should negotiate with the city from a position of strength and not a position of weakness, knowing that you are right on the law, right on the facts, and have thousands of people that are looking to see what you do. I found it very interesting on Monday that the presentation of the City Council had 2 distinct sections. The first was a tale of woe that every household is now encumbered with $10,000 of debt per household due to pension obligations. And then there was, the curtain went down, the curtain went up, you were sitting in your chairs being lectured that a small increase in the library's levy of several dollars is going to make the city go broke. We think that the Evanston Review the Evanston Roundtable, and anyone who looks at this issue rationally sees this as hyperbole. So as you contemplate these hard choices, please know that the Friends are behind you. We have stood beside you, and we will continue to stand beside you. But we want you to recognize that you are, in our opinion, dealing from a position of strength. The Friends stand ready to assist the library as it invokes the fund, implements the fund, and re-envisions its vision, knowing that a stable source of funding will allow holistic planning and will attract the public-private partnerships that are so necessary in this awful era of shrinking municipal budgets. And in this respect, I want to direct, based on all the research that we've done, that there is a tremendous amount of money to be had to improve children's literacy and outreach. And I know, Mildred, that is one of your areas of expertise and interest. I know it is Susan Stone's and Susan Newman's. And this stability will allow outreach and visioning and drawing of money. Finally, I've cited sort of the technical aspects of the Library Act, but as you contemplate what you are going to do, please remember that the library statute requires the board to adopt rules and regulations to render, quote unquote, the use of the library for the greatest benefit to the greatest number of residents and taxpayers. That is your statutory charge. That is your fiduciary duty. I know you know that, but if there is any belief that capitulating to this ordinance, which we believe is fundamentally flawed, or capitulating to what I regard as rhetoric about a small increase in the levy, that's very problematic. And then finally, if there is a belief that closing the branches in any way delivers the greatest benefit to the greatest number of residents and taxpayers, we do not believe that is so. And we hope that you do whatever you can to keep these neighborhood branches alive and kicking. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. So next, difference reports, Laurie Keenan.
Laurie?
I'm going to sing my presentation. I have the props, though, for you. My name is Laurie Keenan. I am Vice President of the Evanston Public Library Friends. I am also a mother, a small business owner, and a 12-year Evanston resident. I wanted to welcome Mildred and Sharon and say that I think we're throwing you into the deep end here, so good luck and stick with us. I was also a member of the Task Force for Sustainable Funding and was part of the process that helped to research some of the options that the library had. In the packet that we just handed out are some of the materials that Michael was just talking about. 3 of the local media sources came out with editorials in favor of the library fund. So I want you to be strong and realize that many of the local, or much of the local community is behind you in the opinion that you've done the right thing for Evanston and for the public libraries. The roundtable, the Evanston Review, Evanston Patch. Also in that packet are a letter from the Family Room, which is a not-for-profit on Central Street in Evanston. It got its start in the public libraries and at Chandler Newberger. They have expressed an interest in partnering with the library and the Friends to use space collaboratively. They're very interested in getting into the south end of Evanston. So that would be a nice partnership opportunity. And there's a letter from their executive director in that packet. Also in that packet is a press release from Whole Foods, which helped us during our fundraising efforts, which Gail Bush told us on Monday topped the winning Library Friends Association. I guess we doubled their fundraising efforts, and we did it in 4 months, not a year. So, woo woo. There's also in that packet a letter from the Dewey Student Council. They also helped us in our fundraising efforts, and a letter from a woman at Albany Care who said that their residents use the South Branch Library very frequently, and it serves many purposes for their residents, as well as a list of quotes from some of the more than 30 local authors who supported the library in our fundraising efforts for our, well, a couple of ways, but mostly for our online auction. So it's all good reading, and I would certainly encourage you, Mildred and Sharon, if you haven't been watching closely, to look through some of those materials. As Michael said, the Friends, we've got a membership base of 3,000 people since March 1st, when we became an official organization, and then subsequently a not-for-profit. My feeling tonight is, and I just want to encourage you to do whatever you can to maintain the branches in Evanston. Our membership base came out of a sort of groundswell of support when the branches were threatened with closure. The initial organization was even called Branch Love. So from that, then, we evolved into the Friends. But I can say without any hesitation that a vast majority of the Evanston Public Library Friends are branch supporters. So I would encourage you, speaking for our membership, to do whatever you can to preserve and enhance the branches. I also feel like the Friends can become a force where in the past there hasn't even been, or it's sort of withered and died, this very kind of weak Friends organization. And now I feel like we're a little bit unstoppable if we can get some of this enthusiasm and support to, as you know, Mike Vasilko said, if we can turn this into a way to help fund some of these programs or fund the libraries. You know, if we can raise, I think right now we're over $200,000 since March 1st, and if we can raise that kind of money with very little organization and a lot of tap dancing, imagine what we could do if we had some time, if we had the backing of the city, if we had the support of our mayor and city council, and your support as well. So I would just encourage you to do whatever you can, because my worry is if the branches are not funded, then I say we're unstoppable, but I have a feeling if the branches are not funded, then it might all come to a screeching halt. So that's, you know, that's not a threat, that's sort of my reality, and I feel like I'm representing the member base when I say that. I do feel like the time is now. I think it was very gracious of Mr. Vasilko to come up and essentially apologize. And I think that part of this idea of working together to find healthy economic solutions for Evanston and for the public library system, we don't have to raise taxes. We don't have to ask the citizens for more money. If we can find a way to help fund it through fundraising, we haven't even done the first, all we've done for grant writing right now is buy some manuals about how to do it. So we've had a meeting, we had 12 to 15 grant writers come out. If we had an arm of the Evanston Public Library that was actively seeking grants, there's a Pepsi Refresh grant that you can get for $250,000. And it's all viral, and I can say that in the past 6 months, if not 10 months, we've become experts in viral marketing. So I would encourage you, I strongly believe in my life and in what I do that a rising tide lifts all boats, and I would ask you to please stay with us and let's help bring the Evanston Public Library system up for all of us, for the entire community. Thank you.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Thank you, I'm sorry. It's 3,000 member families. It's 6,000 members.
Continuation of the Friends report.
Sorry.
certainly the dialogue and the engagement of the community with this library since last year. It's been frenetic. People have definitely have opinions, and that has been through all of this one of the greatest things that's come out of this. We're not all going to agree all the time, but the community involvement and engagement with its libraries is certainly at a level that we have not seen in years. And yes, sometimes it takes a crisis, and clearly that's been the case over the past few years. So nobody wants any of this to come to a screeching halt. Thank the Friends for their report. And Paul, you're up. So I'll give you some background. And this will be a while. So I'll ask members of the Board of Trustees to crane their necks or turn around. And if some of our backs are towards you, please don't be offended. If anybody wants us to move, please speak up. We can move. At our August 4th meeting, we asked Library Administration to prepare several budget scenarios for the coming fiscal year. It's an abridged fiscal year. It's a 10-month fiscal year beginning on March 4th. The city is moving to a calendar year, fiscal year beginning in FY12. That information has been premiered, but we'll be looking at a couple of different scenarios through Paul's presentations. These are not presentations that talk necessarily about the levy itself. These are presentations of what I would like to call raw economic fact. So Paul, and also assuming that the presentations you can see will be these were not sent to us in advance because Paul has been working on them fervently. They will be posted on the website as part of our materials shortly after well, I don't know, soon after this meeting. These will be posted. So what you're looking at now, you will have access to again. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paul Gotcha.
Thank you, Christopher. Good evening, everybody. My name is Paul Gotcha. I'm the library's Administrative Services Manager. And in that role, part of my responsibilities of serving you in the community is managing the budget and the finances for the library. So as Christopher mentioned, at the August 4th meeting, the library board asked for some specific budget options and scenarios to talk about for the budget. So everything that's on the slides is also in a handout that I've passed out. There's also additional copies up here at the front for anybody that would like one as well. For a budget overview, what I want to cover tonight is the budget preparation process that began. It's almost a continuous cycle for me in a lot of ways. But it began in midsummer and the timeline that we're involved in right now. So I want to give you a snapshot of that. There's a number of key factors that are affecting our budget this coming year, and also the city's budget. Our budget is part of the city's budget, so I want to cover those as well. I want to talk about the initial budget that we've submitted to the city's budget office, the city's finance department. I want to cover those three scenarios that were asked for by the library board at their August 4th meeting, and then 4 budget options for the board to consider. And those include addressing the scenarios that the board asked for. The city manager's office and the finance department asked for our first draft of the budget on August 6th. And what's been the case for many years is that budget is modified. It's very fluid and is modified often weekly. And especially as the budget's developed, there are changes that happen regularly. But in that budget, well, let me step back a second. The other things I wanted to cover in terms of the timeline, there was the citizen budget input session last night that some of you may have been to, where the city management is looking for ideas from the community about this coming year's budget. And there's another meeting on the 29th. This coming Monday night is a presentation by the city staff about the current year's budget and where we stand, and then also factors that may affect us next year as well. Coming up on October 8th is the city manager's budget. The balanced budget will be submitted to the city council for consideration. So it's coming right up. In 3 weeks or so, the city council will see the first draft of the balanced budget by the city manager's office. After that, we really have the public hearing and council deliberations. There'll be many meetings back and forth. The council will ask detailed questions about the city manager's budget, ask for alternatives, and to get to a point where we have a balanced budget that's acceptable and the council can adopt. And then right now, the schedule for the budget adoption is on November 22nd. In past years, it's been in late February, but we're changing the budget cycle this year. And then ultimately, the city's tax levy is submitted to Cook County by mid-December. So some key factors for the budget for this coming year. A big one that really confuses things somewhat, is the short budget cycle. Our next year's budget, fiscal year 11, is going to begin March 1st, 2011, and end December 31st, 2011. So the intention is to go to a transition where the fiscal year is the same as the calendar year. And that's principally done for the tax levying purposes, that the levy is adopted in mid-December. So we'll be able to adopt a levy in mid-December, and that money collected then the next year reflects the budget as well. That's one of the principal reasons for it. But for purposes of comparison, when you ask me how much is our budget increasing, I'm comparing a current fiscal year 10-11, that's 12 months, versus next fiscal year 11, which is 10 months. So throughout this process, what I've done is I've prorated the fiscal year 10-11 budget for 10 months. I've taken 10/12ths of it, which is 83%. For the library, our revenues are generally very steady month to month. Our expenses are generally pretty steady month to month. The transition to a 10-month fiscal year is not going to affect us as much as some other departments. The Sanitation Streets Department puts a lot of salt on the ground in January and February, but they're not going to, next year, they're not going to face that because that'll actually be in the following year's budget. So some departments have had, it's very difficult for them to take 10/12ths of the budget. They've got to look at each line item in expenditures and revenue based on when that actually comes in. So throughout this, it becomes a little bit confusing. So if the board has any questions, stop me and I'll be happy to.
As you go, just for
As I
clarification.
go, just let me finish each slide.
I didn't really mean it.
Yeah, he didn't really mean it.
And the other key factors that we're facing in the current year's budget, fiscal year 10-11, the branches were budgeted for 6 months. So when I do a comparison for next fiscal year, I take 10/12ths of a 6 months budget. I take 83% of a 50% budget. So there's a confusing part. So how that also affects us is that when we do a comparison, if we do a full year of branch services, it's going to be a lot more money than what we had budgeted for this fiscal year. And you'll see that as it comes through. That's probably one of the more confusing parts of this whole presentation. And then also there are staff costs that have increased significantly for next year in our budget projections. And I'll talk about those as well as we go over. For our initial budget submission, it was for the 10-month fiscal year. The information we got from the budget office was no increase in non-personnel expenses. And traditionally what happens is that the city's budget staff and personnel, their human resources staff, will do the projections for all salary and benefit costs for employees. In our proposed budget, there are no changes in employees for next year. Actually, with one exception that I'll talk a little bit about later. So the branch operations in the initial budget submission were for the full 10-month fiscal year at the current staffing level. So it's a continuation of the current branch services for the full year. Also, the chargeback issue. The city calls chargebacks interfund transfers. So from one fund, the library fund, to the general fund, it could be the chargeback that we may eventually face for city services that are shared by other departments. So, at some point, the city may have an interfund transfer from the library fund to the general fund for services that are supplied by the general fund. The city of Evanston has $27.9 million of interfund transfers. It's pretty complex. There's a lot to it. So when this discussion about the library interfund transfers came up, the city staff decided it really deserves a closer, longer-term, careful look. So what are those services that should be shared by other funds? How should they be determined? So in the next year, the city's administrative services staff is going to take a really closer look and review that citywide. So it's not just between the library and the general fund, it's going to be a citywide review. So in our budget proposals, we do not know yet what the chargebacks or the interfund transfers for the library might be yet. Under the library fund format, there really are two types of revenue for the library. What I call non-tax library revenue, and that's the library fines and fees, grants, meeting room rentals for this space, the rent that we charge for 2022 Central next door to North Branch are library-specific non-tax revenues. I'm projecting that they'll be down by a little over $26,000 for next fiscal year, and that's on a prorated basis once again. One other significant issue is we have a state per capita grant. The state of Illinois supplies a grant to public libraries based on the per capita population in each town. The budget for next year for that is $62,833. My confidence in the state of Illinois paying that full amount, we're just not sure. To be honest with you, I can't be certain that the state will have that full amount paid or when it may be paid. It's just that's an uncertainty that I'm concerned about.
Okay, can we ask a question?
You can ask a question.
As you're about to change that, you say that you're projecting that the non-tax revenue from fines and fees and what have you is down by 26,000, down from what number, Paul? And I'm sure I got something, but what is the, from?
I don't have that with me. May I get it for you later? I mean, I don't have that on my insurance.
Okay. And then the other question is, you say that the state per capita grant for next year is $62,833. Is that on a 10-month basis, or is that?
That's correct. It's a 10-month basis. And actually, one thing that you may have seen last night if you went to the council meeting, there is a slice of the city's revenue pie that says library revenue. And what that is everything but our fines and fees. Our biggest source of income is overdue fines and fees. That's actually in the city's accounting system classified under fines. So when you see the city revenue reported as library revenue, it doesn't include our biggest source of revenue, which is the library fines and fees. So just, yes, sir?
But those library revenues go back into the general fund, correct?
Well, right now, all of the library revenues are part of the general fund because we are part of the general fund.
Of course, yeah. Just a point of clarification. And when did the state pay its per capita grant in the past fiscal year?
I don't know. I can find that out for you.
But it was paid. The last per capita was paid.
But right now, have you been paid for, what percentage have you been paid this year?
I don't know. Our per capita grant is actually automatically deposited in the city's general fund.
Right.
I mean, so I find that in a city report when it comes up, and I can check. I'll find out for you.
But the state has an extension to pay all of that at this point in time by December 31st, 2010. If that is not all paid to all public libraries in the state, the belief is that they will enact an additional extension period. Telling you what I heard in Springfield last week.
In the current fiscal year, 10-11, there was no wage increase for any city staff. Actually, senior management staff took a 5% pay cut. There was increased payment for medical insurance. There were 4 furlough days, 4 unpaid days for all city staff members. So there were some significant budget savings on city staff in the current fiscal year. For the library, Jim, I'm actually going to just respond to the library board tonight. For the library, our staff was reduced by 10.37 full-time equivalents. And a full-time equivalent would be one full-time person like myself, or two half-time people is one full-time equivalent. So our staffing was reduced by over 10 full-time equivalents last fiscal year. This coming fiscal year, we have a union, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, represents most of our staff members, AFSCME. The AFSCME contract was settled, and there's a 2% wage increase March 1st, 2011, and another 1% wage increase June 1st. Also, there's one less furlough day next year. So these are things that are increasing our staff costs. We're going from 4 unpaid days this year to 3 next year. So there's one more day where employees are going to work and get paid for it. Medical insurance costs are up. And the library employees, our pension is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, known as IMRF. It's a statewide pension plan for municipal employees. It's much different than the police and fire pensions, which are a significant issue. About 3 years ago, IMRF was over 100% funded. Right now, it's approximately 80% funded because of the investment losses. But it's in a much better situation than the other city pension funds. But those costs are up this year. And then there's what I mentioned briefly, too, the effect of a 10-month branch budget cycle on staff. So this year, we were budgeted for 6 months for staff. The Friends in the library came up with the money for the second 6 months, but that's not in the city's budget. So when I'm comparing year to year, the cost for branch staff is up significantly. It's a 10-month year going from the 6-month cycle. So our staff costs, and this is as of last week, as I mentioned, there are changes that happen on a regular basis. How much the city has to pay employer costs for IMRF may change. Medical may change over time as the budget is adjusted. But as of last week, our staff costs for the library were $276,000 over the current year prorated for 10 months. Susan?
Do I understand then that this is not anything that we as a board can negotiate? This is mandated by the union, by the city, et cetera?
Some of them are the contract negotiations. The one thing the board has control over is how many employees the library has.
Okay.
So you can affect that by the employee count.
But last year, we were not allowed to, there was a freeze, is that correct? In addition to the...
Well, there was a hiring freeze last year, but in addition to that, and part of that was we eliminated some vacant positions when we eliminated those 10 full-time equivalent positions. But the board could decide that maybe a service is not needed now. And that's the authority that you would have in the local library.
Yeah.
So this is really a starting point where we're at with the library's budget. And the budget gap really has widened prior to the board making any decisions at all about services or collections or staffing.
Dee?
You say medical insurance is up and pension is up. Do you have any idea by how much?
Do you want to repeat the question until microphones? Did we hear
I'm
that?
sorry, I asked.
The question was how much the medical insurance and the pension are up. The city is right now budgeting 10% of wages for the IMRF pension. And
You mean an increase?
no, that's not an increase. That's where it's at right now. The employer contribution to IMRF, there's 3 parts of IMRF increasing. One is the employee's contribution, the employer's contribution, the city's contribution, which appears in our budget, and then investment returns determines ultimately what our IMRF is part of what determines what our IMRF expenses are. The city recently sold some debt to refinance the early retirement incentive that happened a couple of years ago. So how much the year-over-year increase for IMRF is actually still being worked on right now. We spoke with the city's administrative services staff today, and that's still changing somewhat. There was an issue with IMRF. In the current year's budget, the IMRF budget, there was miscalculated. So in the current year's budget, it's lower than it should be based on the employees we have. So that's an effect as well.
We're trying to make that up.
Who miscalculated that?
The city's budget office. So we'll actually see that in the current fiscal year's budget. Coming up.
Paul, do we know what percentage of city employees, our 10 FTE employees from the library represent?
We've known that. I can find that out for you too. So what percentage of the layoffs were library employees? It was fairly significant. I mean, there were some departments that really had no layoffs at all. So for us, it was a significant amount.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another question.
No problem.
The record is I saw a budget miscalculation. It was miscalculated for 2010, 11,
That's right.
and then it's ongoing.
No, but comparing this current year to next year, because the current year is under budgeted, that increase is greater than it should be. But it's also going to affect us in this current year's budget. I need to manage that because that expense is greater. It was under budgeted. The expense is actual. It's based on the wages of IMRF eligible employees. But it's significant. Susan?
So it's a one-time,
Lip on the-
Yes, it is a one-time flip. But it affects our overall staff costs, comparing the current year prorated versus next year.
so that would be one reason for the 10%.
That's part of the 10%, absolutely. So the next thing I wanted to cover is the scenarios that the board asked for at their August 4th meeting. The first one was to restore the library's collection budget to the fiscal year 09-10 level. In this current fiscal year, the library's collection budget was reduced by over 20%. And then funding of the branch services at their existing level of service. Also in this current fiscal year, branch service was reduced by 1 day per week. So that's option B that I'll cover a little bit later in the presentation. And then in your packet also, there's a spreadsheet that has numbers associated with each of these.
When is this going to end? What option is this?
This is option B.
Option.
The first one we have.
Right, this is what was requested by the board at their,
Okay.
this is what was requested by the board at their October meeting. I'm sorry, August 1st.
So we're starting with option B, not option A.
That's right.
Let me get to it.
All right. Sorry, just.
That's okay. I'm just covering what the board asked for at the August 1st meeting. The second option was the restoration of the library's collection and branch services to the fiscal year 09-10 level. And that's option C that you'll see a little bit later on. The third scenario that the board asked for was maintaining the branches at the existing service level for half of the upcoming fiscal year. So for 5 months. And that would be an additional cost of $140,000. So option A, this is actually what we submitted to the city's budget office. It's a 10-month budget. Both branches would have their current schedule for the 10-month fiscal year. The collection budget would be at the same level it is now on a prorated basis. And this was submitted to the budget office on August 6th. It would represent, on a comparison basis, 8.9% budget increase, and using the library fund model, a 10.8% increase in the library property tax levy.
10% of 2.1% or something like that.
So, with option B, if I remember correctly, the decrease in the collection budgets to the branches was something in the neighborhood of 65% for one,
It was dramatic.
and
I mean,
75% for the other.
That's right.
And option B brings them back because those percentages went into that 21% decrease in overall materials.
That's correct. The branch collection budgets were dramatically reduced in the current fiscal year, anticipating that the branches were going to be closed. I mean, they were really,
They were decimated.
they were eviscerated. So this restores that. It restores the branch collection budgets,
Yes, thank you.
which is frankly the library collection budget.
Yes.
We share our collections amongst all three facilities. So, we have books, main library books going to the branches every day and vice versa. We share a collection. The system shares a collection. And that collection appears in the library departments. It appears in children's services, adult services, and the branches as well. And it's electronic databases and electronic resources, audiovisual resources, and books as well, too.
It's all materials.
And periodicals. It's all materials. And virtual materials, too.
Right,
Digital materials as well.
right,
Digital
right,
materials.
not just book, right, not just book collection, right.
Option C for your consideration is the 10-month budget, both branches returning to the 09-10 schedule, which would be an additional day per week, and then the collection budget also going back to the 09-10 level. And you can see the effect on the library's budget and the tax levy increase. Susan?
I just have to keep saying, when I look at that and it says tax levy 15.5%, it's 15.5% of our, what would our let me get this out. The current library tax levy is like what is it, 1.2? It's 0.128, correct? So it would be 15% of the 0.128. It's not, can you help me? Does anyone understand the question?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
I think you're making it harder though than it is, maybe.
Am I? I
I
just
think
want to
so.
make sure it's clear to
I think
the.
so explain that.
Right. I mean, I don't want to say that it's going to be a 15% increase on 0.128 yet without running the numbers and
That's
showing
right.
you what it might be.
This is all approximation, and I understand that, but it's not like suddenly everyone's taxes is going to go up 15%.
Well, and none of this directly relates to property tax anyway.
That's right.
The city then takes this and, we're just going to have to tax levy.
We're part of the city's budget, so when the library board adopts a budget, it's going to become part of the city's budget, and the city council and the city administration have to integrate that. So what the ultimate effect might be, we don't know.
Right, and we won't be the ones determining.
But, an increase in the library's budget is going to come from that portion of the library's budget that's the property tax levy that supports the library. There's also, several board members mentioned at the August 4th meeting, no tax increase, no property tax increase. So I prepared an option that would show what that means. A 10-month budget, no increase in the levy, would require a budget reduction from that option A level, kind of the status quo current budget, of $338,000. There would be a net library budget reduction of over $26,000 because of our non-tax revenue being down. And there would be no increase in the library property tax levy, as we call it at that point, with option B. So I wanted to present that as something that the board brought up and discussed, but as something for you to consider today too.
Excuse me, Paul, where is that shown?
Where's that shown? On the spreadsheet, it is not shown. Partially because you have not determined how you would want to do that, how you would want to reach that budget reduction. So I can't put numbers to it yet. And I want to give you some ideas, or not ideas as much as context for how possibly to do that. 79% of our budget is our staff. We're not going to cut that much money without significantly reducing staff. So it's a matter of setting service priorities. Where would that happen? And relative to that, to cut $338,000, our collection budget, and under option A, is $382,000. We could end the collection budget. I mean, this is a significant amount of money to do that. And then also in option A, the branch budget was just short of $280,000. Last year during the budget preparations, we considered a number of options about closing the main library. Say, for example, opening at 10 o'clock Monday through Friday as opposed to 9. We looked at closing at 8 o'clock at night instead of 9. We looked at closing a day per week. And it actually takes a lot of closing hours to make a significant difference. So closing Monday through Friday, opening at Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. is about $40,000. Now, and that would be achieved by laying off staff members. Positions have not been identified to do that, but that would be one way to do it. One last thing is we are planning to make a staff reduction for next year. There's currently a full-time administrative position, and we are planning a reorganization to have a half-time position that would be actually lower paid as well. So we're expecting to do this anyway. This does not appear in any of the options, but it's a net savings for the library of $37,500. So we're expecting that to happen anyway. So effectively, anyway, our staff's going to go down by a half of an FTE for the budget process. So also the last piece in your packet is a spreadsheet that covers these options. And if you don't like to take a look at it, let me just work through the columns here. The first column is the 2010-11 approved budget. And I'm showing at the top what's the current general fund support for the budget, and then also the non-tax revenue. So you can see our current operating revenue and budget is $4,217,000. So that's the first column of the current year's approved budget. Our next column is this current year prorated for the 10 months. So this is the column that we can compare the other scenarios with. So I've prorated that for 10 months, and I've also put it in a library fund format. So as opposed to saying it's general fund support, it shows property tax support for the library. So that second column is the current year's budget prorated for 10 months to give you a comparison with the other three options. And then there are the options A, B, and C, which I covered earlier. And also it shows you the change in the library's budget and the change in the library's property tax rate for each of those budget scenarios. Easy peasy, right?
I have a question on your visual number 9, where you say the board scenario, maintaining the branches at the existing service level for half the fiscal year. That means half of the upcoming fiscal year 2011.
Yes. That's
So we're funded.
that scenario may not be relevant because the branches were funded for half of the fiscal year to give the branch supporters an opportunity to address longer-term funding, to raise the money for the second half of the year and address longer-term funding. Since we're past that point, having a half-a-year budget, keeping the branches open this would be keeping the branches open for 5 months next fiscal year.
And you say that we asked for this scenario?
Yes, you did.
I can answer that. Are we done with this much?
Yes, we do.
I mean, the 5-month thing is just sort of weird, but that's why I'm wondering, I don't remember.
It's
Because
unusual, it's really,
Because option A has the branches at current, has the branches at current.
that scenario is not shown in any of the options, but I gave the amount of money that it would cost, additional money that it would cost.
One question is administrative reorganization, 37,500. That was the position you talked about, but it's no longer.
It's a current position in our budget, it's a vacant full-time position. And so we're planning to eliminate that and keep a 21-hour administrative assistant position, principally to help with marketing and PR and development work, which we desperately need.
go back to the slide for option B.
The slide for option B. Sure.
D.
D would really be the.
Slide for option D. D is in dire.
You know, there are those things that the board had no control over that we talked about. The staff cost being a significant part of it. That is increasing our budget, is increasing, widening the gap. And this happens citywide. That is causing the significant increase. So for you not to have any increase in the general fund support in the library would be this much of a budget reduction to keep our budget effectively level. We would need to make reductions from that option A of this amount of money.
Do you have, did you say that you were going to give us some ideas for our managers?
Did I say I was going to give you ideas?
So,
Just as a bit of background, I mean, the city has been in, frankly, difficult financial situation for a number of years. It was more acute last year, and you know there were significant structural changes made last year, which were necessary. We have had a bare bones budget for quite some time. We've made significant reductions to the collection budget over the years, and that shows now in our collection what people want. You know, my recommendation generally is, you know, we want to affect the fewest library users as possible. We've got to protect the investment in the library, in our collections, and in the building. You know, there are a number of things that we've got deferred maintenance issues, I'll be honest with you. There are technology enhancements that we really need to take advantage of. You know, there are other outreach, I mean, the whole idea of marketing and providing service throughout the entire community, in every corner of this community, outside of the 3 buildings, we can do a much better job of. You know, I think that the board and the community really need to focus on goals of effective, efficient library service over the next 3 to 5 years, and set some priorities that then we can budget for. In some ways, I think the 2012 budget is more important for the library board now than the 2011 budget. Because you haven't had a chance to say, this is something we have to do that we've never done before, and it will make a difference in people's lives to a great extent. So, I expect we'll get to that point.
Removing ourselves from, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to get back, I realize I am again beating this dead horse about the, I don't know how to say this, about the hits that we took in our staffing. 79% of the budget is for salaries and benefits, correct?
That's right.
And the library took, would you say, a disproportionate number of what would you call it? What do they call it when you know, you downsize the staff to the extent that the library was last year?
I would not characterize it as disproportionate, though it would be easy to. We looked at specifically outsourcing a significant amount of technical services. So it was a specific targeted service reduction where we could find efficiencies and savings. So that, I mean, it was looking at a division that had a significant reduction. So,
Right, that I realize, but I mean across the city. You know, you're a city employee, right? The library staff are city employees, and I'm looking at the other city departments, and I'm looking at staff reductions. I
Public
guess.
Works took a big hit.
Yeah.
yeah, public works also.
Yeah.
But,
But what we're looking at now, when we say that we have a flooring or a ground or, you know, some place to start with, we're starting at this, I would call it a deficit. We're starting at the staff deficit. We're starting at this collection deficit. We're starting, you know, if you say, well, this is what it is now, and this is what we're going to start with or build on, or this is the floor, you know, we've got holes in the floor.
And the holes in the floor for staffing would be for, by and large, for those public service pieces of doing outreach,
Exactly,
doing
because
the
what
programming.
Paul is speaking
Because
to the
what we
the tech services
Right.
department
That's a reorg, that's a done
was
deal.
more of, I don't consider that to be a reduction. I
Right.
consider that to be repurposing, reorganization, things that needed to happen, and it happens. And that's how libraries move forward. And so some of the software kinds of things that you're talking about, technology, would even, it's possible that staff would be reduced because other things are enhanced if we were able to afford.
I think there are technology changes that will put staff to much better use.
Yes.
So self-checkout stations. Right now, we have circulation staff members who are checking out books, where we could have those staff members be much more effective in providing library service
Absolutely.
with the
Right.
technology.
And that's what
And
we would
everything,
repurpose
and
those folks.
everything that the Alderman Jean-Baptiste was discussing, the wonderful things about the reading stop, would you call it? Reading stop. We're all staff. And as Susan Stone spoke to so passionately, are really those types of staffing issues that we could be repurposing, reorganizing, and working toward more outreach to serve more people with a higher quality of library service.
Because that would be our goal with the RFID that we talked about. For
So
how long
I
now?
just wanted to, I
Exactly.
apologize,
So we
but I
would-
just wanted to make
Yep,
that clear,
absolutely.
that that's where this kind of ground is starting.
Is RFID in the capital improvements program? It's not.
No.
Not right now.
It had been, hadn't it?
That had been for a period of time.
But it's been removed?
And because and I'm sure it's still on somebody's list, but in terms of those things, because of priorities and amounts, it's not been. So we would be starting over, putting that in.
What is the cost of that RFID program?
That all
To
depends
implement that.
on how much it could be, anywhere from, and this is ballpark figures, because it depends on how much of the collection you tag, how many self-check units you purchase, whether you purchase the automated materials handling, which allows customers to bring their materials in, they go through a sorting machine that puts them into a rough sort before any staff member ever touches them. So that's an added piece, which again, saves time and gets stuff back on the shelves faster and accuracy. So it could be anywhere from, and I'm gonna ballpark this, 450 to 600,000. That would do the entire system. And
And that-
typically those pay for themselves in 5 to 7 years.
But that's a capital cost, right?
Correct.
Okay, are you saying that in order for the staff reductions to take place effectively, that we would have to have this particular system in place?
Well, if we don't have something to suck up the work that people do that might be laid off, then services have to stop.
Well, I understand that, but then it doesn't seem like it's a very realistic possibility in this environmental, or maybe
It's
it's
not a very good one.
economic.
It's,
Yeah.
Let me know if you want me to pass this mic around. I realize it's sitting here in front of me.
We are-
The audio, I'm told by the cameraman that the audio is okay. If you guys can still hear us all, then we're okay, right? Okay.
And there are some options with, for example, the RFID. For several libraries that are interested in doing the same thing or expanding, working together with vendors so that you get, so there are some of those. There are ways to phase it in over a period of time. You could start with the children's area, for example, and do all that. So there are varying degrees of what you can do. Frankly, we could implement an automated materials return system right now that could then be expanded as we move the entire collection. So there's a lot of advancement in terms of being able to phase in some of the technologies. And just like when we talked 3 months ago about the Iliad software, that would make a significant amount of difference in the way the people that currently are involved in doing that, so that they'd actually be able to spend time on the desk.
Would you explain, Elliot, for?
Oh, sure. Iliad is a software program that pretty much renders interlibrary loan paperless. And so in effect, you all would, that do interlibrary loan, would be able to set up an account on our website. And you can place your own requests there. It tracks the requests as they go beyond our library. So you would never have to call and say, where's my interlibrary loan? Because you could look right in your account and it would say, the request has been submitted, it's processed, it's been shipped. Next thing you know, you'd get a notice that here it was. And so then it eliminates all of the paperwork and handling that staff have to do with that.
Which is very paper heavy,
Very paper
labor
heavy.
intensive.
Very.
Pay lots of staff time paid to do that.
Or I wanted to contextualize things a bit. This is a question maybe I'll ask to Mary and Paul. Library fund libraries, like most municipal non-district libraries in Illinois, are still typically component units of the city. So I think it would be, we have all the personnel costs that you talked about, some which were quite unexpected. We're looking at $337,000.
Plus another 26,000.
Plus another
if you're looking
26,000.
at
So what are the
reduced
current
revenue.
what are the current instructions from the city to departments for preparation of their abridged FY11 budget?
At the present time, there is a, which there always is, it's a natural occurrence, a gap of several $1 million between revenue and expenditures projected for next year. So the city staff, I mean, we're all looking for ways to propose to shorten that gap. What we've been asked, and what is usually asked at this time of year, is propose a 5% cut across the board to reach that shortfall. And so, so the cities, they're fine-tuning every revenue, every expense that they can, and then looking at changes in service delivery to close this gap. It's much less than it was last year. Last year at this time it was about 9.6 million. I don't know the exact number. I think that may become public on Monday night when the city's going to do a mid-year budget review, potentially. That it's still a moving target. It always fluctuates both directions at this time of year, and new information comes in.
And is that 5% cut across the boards after these personnel costs? So Gail was alluding to sort of creating an even lower floor than we're at now, given this. So where's that 5% reduction from? Right? What's the point at which that 5% reduction starts?
Well, it was from the original budget submission, so effectively option A here. And that's true for all city departments. So the city departments were made to estimate their expenses for the full year. So for example, for the recreation department, their prime season is going to be next summer. It will be their expenses are going to be principally all within that 10-month cycle, because it's in the middle of the summer. Because they've got all their programs out happening in the summer. So they're not going to be able to come in at 10/12 of their current year budget of expenditures. So, it varies by department, but it's basically a 5% reduction on the original budget submission citywide, which is a way to look for opportunities, and each one will be investigated and considered.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that every department will see 5% reduction in the end, because as you look at all the options, one department may take a bigger hit in order to balance that,
As we did.
as we did last year, and so it may be.
Excuse me?
As we did last year, but it may,
As we did last year.
because we took some bigger hits than other departments, but part of that's based on the service that has to be provided.
So would you think that might be, is that equitable over some period of time? Do you think that the kind of nuanced so that if a particular department maybe takes more of a hit in one year, then it kind of, there's a balancing act that occurs, or?
No.
No.
Nor should it be. I mean, in terms of good management, because the council may have priorities that one department, and frankly, I mean, the public safety is a a significant priority for Evanston residents.
Sure, as it should be.
So police and fire, if you factor also in their pension as part of their
Well.
obligation,
You go there and
the portion of the city's budget for police and fire has increased significantly over time.
yes, that's correct.
Well, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. Thank you. You're awesome.
Thank you.
One thing, actually, I've got an answer to one of the questions that was asked earlier. The question was about the total amount of non-tax revenue for the library. For the 10-month proposed fiscal year 11 budget, our our non-tax revenue projections are $351,250. And of that, $150,000 of that is for fines and fees. Excuse me. So, obviously, that's the biggest part.
So if we're correct in looking at these options that you've given us, the city has asked for no increase in non-personnel areas.
That's correct.
In all of these scenarios that you've given us, you've taken into account these changes in benefits, and it's all in there now.
Yes, it is. And also, the one scenario includes additional staff at the branches. Just for clarification too, we've created a new department, we've combined the branches. And we did that because Connie Hennigan, the branch manager, is working both places. And actually all the staff members are now working in both places. They used to be pretty much separate, but given that flexibility of staffing, we're treating the branches as one. It simplifies things ultimately, and it recognizes the reality of the flexibility of branch staffing. That's the reason why.
So the neighborhood services is just the branches, is that correct?
That's correct.
It isn't outreach, you're still doing outreach.
There is outreach that happens in children's services and adult services as well by that staff. So it's the what I'm calling neighborhood services is just the branches. One other important thing to consider about neighborhood services is that for the South Branch, I've had to assume that we're staying at the current location for the next fiscal year because there's been no decision made on relocating South Branch. So that's a placeholder. That cost, the lease cost, is a placeholder until we know more about what the decision is on the future location of South Branch.
So the budget that the city now has is option A.
That's correct.
Less 5%.
No,
Wow,
they have-
No, actually, it wouldn't be less than 5%, it would be, what they're asking for is the 10-month,
What they
the
have is option.
2011 budget on a 10-month prorated basis.
Right.
And they want that reduced by 5%.
What they've gotten is proposals from city departments about how the budget could be reduced by 5%.
Right, I didn't even list it. 5% reduction is not represented here. Okay.
Right.
Or in the city's budget yet, because those decisions haven't been made citywide about what the city manager may decide to incorporate in the budget that he's going to present to city council.
And so option A, B, and C are all above and beyond. It's a 10% increase, 14 and 15% increase in property tax levy for the library, correct?
Well,
If we're talking in library fund terms.
and my understanding is that we don't definitely have to do 5%. Maybe, or did I misunderstand that? There was kind of a general understanding among.
I'm preparing a budget for the city administration. You're preparing and deciding on a budget for the library.
That's right.
So, that hasn't affected you yet.
Yet.
because you have to make your decision on what your priorities are in
Right.
terms of any increase in the library's budget, if there is one, or what the service priorities might be.
But we know that this is going to go to the city, and we all have a good idea what the response is going to be if we're showing these kinds of increases.
The traditional model for municipalities that have a library fund is the library board presents a number to the city administration of what that levy amount for the library property tax would be.
Well, the library board asks the staff to provide and to present to the city.
Yes.
Correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Just to clarify.
Well, it seems to me like there are a lot of uncertainties in this whole process. I mean, you've done as good a job as you can, but it's definitely an uncertain situation. And I have to say that looking at some of these increases, I'm very uncomfortable with those. I'm not saying how we're going to reach, we're not going to reach a budget decision tonight, obviously, about where our money is going to go. But I think that given all the conversation and given all the support that we've had, I have to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion about the budget. And it's probably, and it doesn't say how we're going to spend our money, but I would like to move that the board use as its guidelines for the budget that we adopt for the fiscal year 2011, which is just the 10-year transition year, that we not increase the library's tax levy portion of property taxes over the fiscal year 2010-2011 level as prorated on a 10-month basis, accepting only those increases in personnel costs that were related to salaries and benefits that are, which includes union agreements. I move that.
Could you be
Yeah, we need to
fair?
keep blocking out, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I move that we use as the board's guidelines, as we're preparing the budget, just our guidelines for preparing the budget that we adopt for fiscal year 2011, which is not, it's just the guidelines, that we not increase the library's tax levy portion of property taxes over the fiscal year 2010-2011 level. That's on a prorated basis of 10 months. Accepting only these increases in salary and benefits that are included, including the union contract agreements.
I second.
The motion has a second, so I would ask, because that's a long motion, that this be read again,
Yeah, I'll read it again.
and then the motion is seconded, the motion be read again.
This is, I'm going to move that we use, that the board uses as its guideline as we look at preparing the budget that we want to adopt for the fiscal year 2011, that we not increase the library tax levy portion of property taxes over fiscal year 2010-2011 as prorated on a 10-month basis. This whole proration thing is very complicated. But, I mean, basically, we're not going to raise the property tax level, excepting only for increases in personnel costs that relate to salaries and benefits that are parts of union contracts.
Is this
over
all
which
part
we-
of the motion?
Yeah.
So we don't, in essence, we don't have that.
Hold on for a second.
Well, we had well, Donna,
Dee,
yeah,
I want to make sure that everybody is clear on this one.
okay.
So if you want to read it one more time without interruption, because you're kind of going off on tangents, which I understand. Let's say that.
Okay, all right.
Read
All
it,
right.
read it. Yes.
All right, I move that the board's guideline for the budget we adopt for fiscal year 2011 be that we not increase the library's tax levy portion of property taxes over the fiscal year 2010-2011 level
as prorated on a 10-month basis, excepting only for increases in personnel costs related to salaries and benefits, which covers non-union and union agreements.
I'm sorry. Is that?
No, it's not, because because.
Is that the motion?
Yes, the motion, that's the motion.
And that's what
We can discuss. it.
Motion is read.
That's what you seconded.
And it- yes, now
And this
we
is what you
discuss it.
seconded?
Yes.
Now we open this up for discussion.
Okay.
And I'll recognize, and I want to remind, I want to point out that this motion was not on the agenda, that this is an actionable item that was not placed on the agenda. And I think it's fair to say that, and that needs to be said normally. So let that out. That does not prevent us from starting the conversation. This is a motion that has been presented. So let's open this up, and I'll just recognize everybody as we go along. Susan Newman.
Thank you. From your motion, this is not reflected in any of the scenarios we have in front of us, is that correct?
Well, obviously not, because if you look at all of these,
Nothing's obvious.
No, but it is from the options. Look at the options and look at the increases in cost. It is not.
It is not
It is
reflected
not.
in anything we have.
Correct.
Thank you.
I thought it was option B.
Well, option D, it is kind of option D, but we don't have option D on here.
Oh, I'm with you, okay.
Option D is basically remaining,
No, Paul is saying no.
80% of the budget is personnel. Option D was no increase in the property tax level at all. If you excluded that part about
yes,
excluding
yes,
personnel.
right,
So,
yeah, that's
this
correct.
option was not presented.
Correct. We don't have the numbers. But we know that those,
I mean, this is going to require us to come back with you to work the numbers, to
Yes.
come back with you with how we could implement this.
right, because you're saying 80% of the costs are the personnel.
That's right.
Okay.
And so that part of the property tax levy would increase, correct?
Because the benefit
So she made that exception. Right.
But there are other expenses that increased in these scenarios as well that we're going to have to adjust back on.
I understand that.
So we need to either hear from the board the priorities or suggest them, recommend them to you. We need direction.
But I think the import of her motion is very clear, and that we can discuss it and can vote on it. Because what it's saying is effectively that we are, with the exceptions that she's mentioned, that there will be no increase in the library's property tax portion of the taxes over this year, with the exceptions that were mentioned at the end of the motion. The personnel.
But, excuse me, but almost in order to we know what we estimate that to be. We would be able to have a really illuminated discussion if we had a library fund and we would actually know what the numbers were. But really, in fact, what you're asking is puts sort of a perfect exclamation point on the fact that there's so much that we don't know, numbers that we don't have, what do they call them, the transfer fund, and all the other numbers that we do not have in order to make a truly, I guess, enlightened determination based on what it is that you're presenting to us. And I would suggest that having the fact that we have a motion that passed requesting that we approve the implementation of the library fund model, which was approved on August 2nd. Fourth, thank you. Leads us to the kind of discussion that we would be able to then have regarding the budget, regarding staffing, regarding all of the expenses that we have at the library. So I think it's a perfect point toward that, but I would venture to say that at this point, I think something like putting a sort of any hard and fast declaration as we have on the table is premature.
Done.
I think this was stated as a guideline.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have hard and fast numbers for quite a while. There are a lot of numbers
Right.
that we're going to have to work out. But the
Right.
point of this was to have a guideline as far as our goal, as far as where we're going.
Right.
Well, I would also, okay, I'd like to recommend perhaps, because I don't, as I said at the city council meeting too, I think it was Alderperson Wynn, I know I personally am on a learning curve, and I would suspect that the rest of us, are too. Some of us are swimming in the deep end, right, trying to, and this evening I brought with me copies of the financial manual for Illinois Public Libraries, a copy for every board member, and I would suggest that we read this before we continue the discussions that have so many extenuating, every discussion that we have about every point about the budget. I think, I don't know about y'all, but none of us have ever been on a library board, as far as I know, previously, that has either been a separate public library district or has implemented a library fund. And so I don't know about, like I said, the rest of you, but I need to do much more of my homework before I can feel absolute about anything that it's, and that's how I feel
Just
about that part
remember
of the
this, this is
discussion.
a guideline. We're just using this as a guideline.
Hear ya, I hear ya, I know what I don't know. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. I'm not there, and others might be, but I'm not there.
Edie, are you thinking about, I'm sorry, was there something? Okay, well, I'll take it. So were you thinking, when you're thinking about personnel costs, about that $276,000?
Well, that's part of it, absolutely, because we've got, somewhere along the line here, we've got $380,000 that we have to figure out how to, I don't know where it's gonna come from. I mean, it's something that we need to discuss. It's gonna require a lot of discussion on our part.
Yes.
And I think that we need to have, clearly another meeting dedicated to this sooner rather than later.
We'll discuss that, too.
I thought we were just discussing tonight. I mean,
We are.
Right,
This is a
and I
motion that
thought-
wasn't on the agenda. but
Right,
this
it
is-
wasn't on the
so I
agenda.
But it's,
completely,
yeah.
But it gives us,
Apologies for
but
being
it
so
gives us, no,
unprepared.
but I just think that it gives us a guideline in which to work, because we seem to be, we don't have enough information, but we need to do something. And this at least gives us a guideline, and I think.
Paul?
It's just a guideline.
For a second, Lynn, Susan, Lynette?
When you're saying it's a guideline, but the personnel is such a big percentage of it, it doesn't make sense.
We'll
to
have
me.
to talk about that.
Yes, I mean,
Lynette?
Well, I'm going back to the process and the timeline. So we're looking at by October 8th, having this discussion and making these decisions. Yes, and
Well, that's what
October
this
8th is.
Well, I think we'll talk about that in new business in terms of when we would want to meet next, because this was a lot of information, and there's still more as part of tonight's discussion to put out there, and all of we now know, so we know what we know in terms of cost of, in terms of what the various scenarios are for next year. My question to Paul, possibly to Mary, is as we're looking at all of this, we're still assuming a steady state with city-provided services. So the assumption of this is that the current model, in which we haven't really worked out chargebacks with the city, and our level of cooperation with the city, which is going to be deep and meaningful. We are a component unit of the city. The assumption here with these numbers is that and some of the things that we've read in the newspapers and our discussions with the city, and some of the things that were discussed on Monday night, that all is yet to be determined. And it seems, from what you're indicating, Paul, is that the city and from the board, the material that was even provided in the board packet, which I thank them for, because that's certainly a beginning, is that is something that the city needs 2011, that year, to do. That's the time frame the city's looking at working out all of these interfund transfers, both with the library, and it also appears to be as part of a larger process for all departments. So I think it may be fair to assume at this point that this won't be information that would be provided for us, and I think that we're working very closely with the city. So this assumes just the library budget as it is, with various services that the city provides the libraries in steady state, with no chargeback model yet. That's what these numbers represent, correct?
So that's-
Yes. So we're looking at, yeah, of course.
With one possible exception,
With one possible exception,
legal services.
legal services.
Which we know about.
I didn't quite understand.
The city's corporation council,
It's not going to represent it because of the possible conflict. So that means that we have to budget for legal services for ourselves, or we will do that on an ad hoc basis. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Want to call the question? We're going to ask you one more time. The question's been called. There's no more discussion on this, to my understanding.
Some people want to discuss.
Do you want to discuss, do you have questions?
No, I don't.
So, Lynette is calling the question, so, once again, I'm going to ask Dee Dee to read.
I'm making a motion that the board use as its guideline for the budget that we adopt for fiscal year 2011, that we do not increase the library's tax levy portion of property taxes over the fiscal year 2010-2011 level as prorated on this 10-month basis, accepting only increases in personnel costs related to salaries and benefits, including those that are covered under union contracts. There are some non-union people and then there are union.
End of motion.
Yes.
All right, the question has been called, and the motion was made by trustees, so we'll move through this. This is, in my opinion, a roll call vote. So I would ask Vice President Newman to go down the list of trustees in alphabetical order for a roll call vote on
The motion.
the motion.
Diane Allen Jacoby made the motion, so
Aye.
Sharon Arsenault,
Aye.
Gail Bush,
Nope.
Donna Gerson,
Aye.
Mildred Harris. Mildred?
Aye.
Lynette Murphy. Susan Newman, no. Christopher Stewart,
No.
Susan Stone is not here. That is the roll.
And what's, sorry, I didn't get the tally.
5 to 3. The ayes have it, 5 to 3.
The motion carries. Serve as a guideline for our budget preparations for the levy model that we will accept. This is not the motion. I'm not reading the motion again, but it was essentially the guidelines were to accepting for increases in personnel costs that we would reflect in the levy, essentially steady state, based on the FY 10-11 budget prorated.
Is it possible for an ignorant person from the audience to ask a question about this? Because it puzzles me very much. Where is the planning for the collection, which has been starved now for years, the technology, which is falling further and further behind, the addition of skilled staff who know how to use the modern technology? Well, I don't get it. How does it fit in with that proposal?
I'm going to, we'll have another citizen comment. I apologize.
Oh.
Thank you, but we, The motion has been made and the motion is carried, that we will use as a guideline. No tax increase.
Understand that.
Well, that is a guideline for our budget preparation. We have a lot more discussion to have here tonight.
I'm out of here.
Can we enter into that discussion?
No, sorry.
How about a parliamentary point of order? Would you like to hear something about a point of order for parliamentary procedure? When the question is called, you have to vote on it. This is not like poker, where everybody has to.
The
put
question
down
was
your
called
vote.
and we
You
voted.
have to vote on calling the question, which ends discussion. So if people here did not want the discussion to end.
No, it's my understanding that the
No, you
discussion.
voted on the motion. You didn't vote on whether to call the question. But two separate things. When someone.
That's
says-
fine, that's fine, right.
Yeah.
Lynette called the question, and oftentimes that is interpreted as, let's vote on the motion. So we can,
But it is a motion that you need to vote on.
fine. That's fine.
And you did.
That's right, okay, fair enough. Fair enough, Lynette. We will, right. We will vote on questions called to in discussion.
I think it's moot at this point. I'm just pointing it out because this is a mistake that is made by a
Right, right.
governing body.
We made the vote, we voted. It doesn't change the fact of the vote. It doesn't change the outcome of the vote. But thank you for the clarification. Okay, let's move on to the President's report. That's me. Since August 4th, we have had several discussions and we have engaged the community, beginning on August 4th, leading us to where we are now. Susan Newman and I had discussions and meetings with city officials, including the mayor. We led 2 public forums in this space and at Fleetwood Jourdain. I know that Dee Dee and myself at the end attended the budget workshop last night. We have opened, and this is part of my report, reporting on all of the various discussions that we've had with the community, and of course culminating in the city council meeting on Monday night. I thank all of the supporters of the library board. This is a process, and not one in which there's unanimity on the board itself, but we're going to work through that to the model that we adopted on August 4th. I believe that that's the best path for the future of Evanston's library. And in the current situation, where we are now, the city's financial situation, the conversations that we've had with the community and we intend on continuing to have with the community, we're very aware of what we're saying. And we have some very important work to do in the coming 2 weeks. Even with the levy model, we decided that we're respecting the city's schedule. The city needs to know where the library is with its budget so it can plan effectively. That's one of the reasons that we have, well, that's the primary reason that we had the meeting on August 4th. So we are working in a time frame with respect to the city's process as well for the coming fiscal year, bridge fiscal year FY11. So I thank all my fellow trustees who've been out there with me and with others there on Monday night. And welcome again our new trustees. And that is my report. Now we'll move to Susan Newman for a financial report. We have the packet in front of you.
At this point, I'm going to refer to Paul because there's been so much going on.
This packet is 4 months, July 31st, so 4 months into the fiscal year.
For the sake of brevity, I'd be happy to answer any questions people might have. Otherwise, I have no additional report on it.
4.217872, 41.7% through it. So, things seem about on par.
We are, that's
Okay. Mary, the library director's report?
Actually, the activities in your packet will stand for my report, other than to say that we did have indeed a successful summer reading program, and we're still compiling some of the information on that, but overall registrations were up about 33%. Completion of the program was up 30%. And so part of the idea, I believe, as I recall, we had 600 and some off-site registrations. So that was particularly heartening to all of us. And the fact that the increase of registrations and the increase in completions of the program were neck and neck, I think, is also a good indication that we're having success with the summer reading program. And then I would just point out that September is library card sign-up month. And so this won't apply to any of you because y'all have library cards, we hope. But if you get a new library card during September, Andy's Frozen Custard and Whole Foods are providing some treats if you show that you got a new library card. And we've done a lot of work in schools to go to the schools and encourage kids and families to get their library cards. So this is part of a national program. And then we do also have an art exhibit on the second floor. I don't know what time it is. Well, it's past closing time, so you probably won't look at it tonight. But this is a new program that one of our staff members initiated that is both a virtual and an actual art exhibit piece. Sometimes they go hand in hand, but this is local artists, and so there will be ongoing programs there. Thank you.
Questions?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about the success of the stop at Dempster Dodge?
I don't have the final numbers on that with me right here, but because we're still putting all this stuff together for graphs. But
was there a good feeling that it did?
It was slow. It was definitely slow. But we had times. One number I saw at one point because Cater Care came regularly, 156 1 week. And so there were, because a lot of it was, we're there a short period of time, and so we didn't have a lot of repeat customers. But I will get you the numbers. Pardon me?
Rent the space?
We did rent the space. Remember, you all allocated up to $10,000 for summer reading program, and we also received $2,000 from the mayor for summer reading. So that lease and the products, the materials were purchased for that, and staff time, because there were a number of staff folks who worked extra hours to man the booth, as well as man the sites, all three of the summer reading sites, as well as some volunteers who helped. There were a number of volunteers from the Friends, and we also had some opportunities for the Put Illinois to Work program. We were able to participate in that in conjunction with Flip Jordan for some help.
Okay. Mary, does that conclude your report?
Yes.
Okay. We have new business, an asterisk, so this is on the agenda, is requiring a vote. Mary, do you want to talk to us a little bit about continuing the extended hours in the teen loft?
Yes. If you'll recall, earlier this summer, we had asked that we adjust the hours in the loft to 11 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock because there weren't a lot of kids coming in at 9 o'clock. And that actually worked out in a positive way in several ways. We've talked with staff. They've monitored all of that and looked at the levels of business. And staff's feeling is that this would be a good opening hour to continue. That in looking back at past experience, we don't have kids.
All in favor?
Aye.
We can have discussion.
I was just going to ask, I must have missed this, so it was through the closing time. Did I miss that?
It's just the opening. We just open at 11 instead
Just
of
want
9.
to clarify.
And just on Saturdays.
And just on Saturday.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, so any more discussion?
Just have to be clear.
That's fine. So the motion to continue modified hours in the loft. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Gail, our fellow trustee and current president of the Illinois Library Association, is going to give a report on the ILA annual conference coming up and trustee day.
Well, clearly you can see that library trustees have a lot of knowledge that they need to have to do the best that they can for library service in each of their communities. So I'm sure that all of you already have the trustee fact file that's published by the Illinois State Library and the Illinois Library Association that you all have read and know what's in here. Tonight I brought the financial manual for Illinois Public Libraries, and I'm sure that you are also all have the Illinois Library laws and rules that's current. This is a new edition this year, so that you all have that and all this information so that we have that as a basis. In addition to that, there is a number of opportunities for library trustees to learn about issues that pertain to them. There is the Illinois Library Trustees are able to be members of the Illinois Library Association for a very reduced amount, and there's a lot of professional development throughout the year, including forums and conferences and workshops. The annual conference for the Illinois Library Association is coming up at the end of September on the 28th through the 30th. On the Tuesday, the 28th, there is a session that is called Pound It, Shout It, Cook It, Book It, YA Programming Partnerships, and it is the Evanston Public Library that is discussing their programs for teens and forging new partnerships. This was by far the most popular proposal, and I just wanted you to all know that it discusses partnerships, talks about recycled drumming, All Our Sons, Science Cafe, partnership with Northwestern, Book It and Cook It, partnership with Whole Foods, and the Public and School Library Book Club, partnership with Nichols. On Wednesday, the 29th, there is a session on proper procedures in maximizing your levy and budget, and that is offered by library attorneys, and that's in the morning on Wednesday, the 29th.
Where's it located?
This is all at Navy Pier. It's the ILA annual conference. You can go to ila.org, www.ila.org. If you wanted to go to the exhibits any of the days, it's free. The exhibits are totally free. And trustees have a reduced rate to attend this professional development. So that one session is Wednesday morning from 9 to 10:30. On Thursday, it is Illinois Library Trustee Day. Thus far, I think we have over 1,000 people come to the whole conference, but I think there's 150 maybe or so trustees from libraries around Illinois who attend Library Trustee Day. There's a session in the morning about Freedom of Information Act, best practices, how to run an effective board meeting that comply with the Open Meetings Act. There's a session about evaluating the library director that is a session that's brought together by a director and the chair of the board, of their board. There's a marketing market, which is all the libraries in Illinois coming together and just, showing the marketing tools that they have. And there is a closing session called Loud and Proud that Jesse White will be attending, and all of the trustees who are in attendance will be honored at that session. That's Jesse White and our legislative and administrative and advocacy consultants will be there that afternoon. So in that day, the trustees have their meetings, they have their luncheon, and have their, the breakfast and such all together, so that they learn from each other. You sit at tables with other trustees from other libraries, and that is on Thursday, September 30th. And it's all at Navy Pier, and I invite you to go on the website and look at the conference. I invite you all to attend. Our Illinois author speaker is going to be Peter Sagal, the host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and we're all going to taping. And of course, there's a pub crawl. So something for everyone. Anyway, I invite you to come. There's so much, there's so much to learn. And as we go down the path that we're going, regardless of which path actually we do go, we all have, I think, a lot to learn. And we can learn from each other and from others who have more experience and knowledge.
And you'll bring back information for us from the September 29th morning session. It sounds very pertinent.
I don't know if I can, I have responsibilities.
Yeah.
So I'm going to attend as much as I can on trustee day itself. But I spoke with the director yesterday, 5 or 6 of their trustees are going, trustees go to attend this in large numbers. Thank you.
Finally, in new business, we have a discussion of the ordinance proposed by the city, provided in our packet for Monday night, not voted on by the city, for discussion in this body tonight. And as we talked about with members of the city council, we have a lot on our plates right now, and this ordinance was provided to the community last week. We certainly owe it to ourselves to have a discussion about this. Obviously, that's why it's an agenda, and I want to open it up in that format. Get everybody's thoughts on this proposed ordinance. Everybody's had a chance to take a thorough look at it. To me, many times, and given the budget scenarios, given all the things that we've discussed tonight, I want to understand where we think this ordinance fits in with the decision that we made on August 4th, and what trustees think of this ordinance in terms of the library's overall financial future, long term. And otherwise, just to get everybody's thoughts. So the ordinance it's an ordinance amending Title VII, Chapter 14 of the Evanston City Code by adding subsection 714.4 library budget as listed in the agenda. And this does affect the current ordinance on the books that vest authority as given by state statutes to the Board of Trustees of the Evanston Public Library. It has a relationship with that ordinance as well, and I want to talk about that. But I'd like to open it up for discussion. Susan.
My first question is, I think I know the answer to, if we do this, does that undo our assuming the library fund?
We do what?
If we accepted this ordinance?
Well, we haven't accepted the ordinance.
I said if
Right.
we accept the ordinance, does this undo our decision, which we've already voted on, to have a library fund?
Can I have a clarification? Is that we're having a discussion, is that right?
Yes, I'm asking the
Yeah, I
discussion.
know, but I mean, that's all, this tonight.
This is just a discussion tonight.
Okay.
Right,
Correct.
so I think it's an important question, because we have voted on it.
I was just clear. Thank you.
This is my question clear? I don't know who's going to answer that, but I'm assuming the answer is that it would undo our assuming the library fund, but I wanted to clarify whether it did.
This is the council votes on this, is this?
That's correct.
Okay, and so
We don't.
what was the discussion? It,
There was none.
The
okay.
mayor asked for discussion. Excuse me? I believe that the mayor asked for discussion on this.
It was never formally introduced.
Good.
It was on the agenda.
This is part of the consent agenda for City Council. It was put there, and it's
Somebody asked us for our opinion on it.
We had a, correct, we spoke.
Because we responded and said that we were not going to discuss it until we discussed it here.
But the point is that the council didn't
right.
pass it, didn't discuss it. If they pass it, how does that affect us? that's my question, which really I asked in a different way. Do we know the answer?
I asked the alderman who's here. No? Okay. Clarify?
No, it's in, the ordinance ties the library budget to the general fund. That's percentage. And in your question about, there's section 3, I'm on the board of trustees, I'm not the attorney for the board of trustees.
No, and you don't have to have
But
an answer. You
section
can say
3,
you don't know.
I don't know, but I would point out that section 3 says that all ordinance or parts of ordinance in conflict herewith are hereby repealed. And that is my, I'm not answering that question, but that's kind of my observation on that one.
Okay.
You can observe on a question, that's my
So
observation.
it's
And more,
possible
yeah.
that it would undo if, and do we have a yay or nay over accepting their ordinance?
It is not our ordinance.
If it's correct, they passed the ordinance, where does that leave us? Do we have any room?
Yeah. Lynn?
Does the city ordinance supersede the state law?
That's the question.
Let me do
Okay,
the best I
please,
can.
please.
Just do the best I can with what I know. The city of Evanston decided that it wanted a library. When a municipality decides that it wants, when a municipality decides that it wants a library, is obligated to follow the law which has been set down by the state in order for that entity to be able to survive and ideally to thrive. Okay. So the vote that we had on August 4th was to implement the ordinance that the city has already, as Christopher says, on the books. Because when it decided it wanted a library, it needed to have the appropriate ordinance in place to support it. Because you can't just decide that you want it and then not support it. And I do think that it is possible, I could be wrong here, again, not an attorney, I do think it's possible to perhaps amend that ordinance or to have another ordinance superseded if you want to be able to spend more than the state statutes allow. Okay? I do not think that it is possible, and I'm not using the legal language I know, to write to have an ordinance supersede the one that the city already has that allows for the city to manage and operate the library that decided that it wanted. That's my understanding.
So what's the purpose of the ordinance?
My feeling is that the purpose of the ordinance was a solution presented by the mayor that I think probably, it was, this is new to everyone, and so I have to say, in her sort of giving her the benefit of the doubt and on her behalf, that it was probably a creative solution that she saw to maybe get us from where we were to where we say we would like to be with the library fund, and something of a, I guess I'd call it a solution. So that's my thinking about what the intent of it is. But that's just, again, I'm speaking for myself, Lynette, that's how I feel about what this is.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So if you think that her intent was to get us from where we are now to the library fund, what did
No, I didn't say that.
That's not.
I did not say that.
Oh, I thought you did.
No.
Okay, so the intent is to get us from where we are now to what?
May I answer that?
Yeah.
Susan?
I think to a baseline below which supposedly we cannot go, so that we are not in fear that next year, just as we potentially have to cut 5% this year, just as we cut last year 10%, we wouldn't be asked by the city to cut next year, and the year after, and the year after. It would provide,
Level
in
fund
essence,
floor.
a floor.
A
That
base-
is,
right, a base
that is
fund,
the
you're right.
best understanding of the.
I would agree.
And I can only say that that's my understanding. But then I can respond to what I think about that.
It's a discussion.
Right.
Lynette?
Well, again, we're, how much money are we talking, I mean, what are we talking about? We don't
But this
know.
is all tied to, this is all an unknown, because there, you know, what this is the baseline, that it was, what, the 2010 budget?
2010, 2011 budget is the
Budget,
base.
that was the baseline, and then we could not, then we would have to follow any increase in the general fund, and whatever percentage increase, we could then follow that. Which seems to me, as I said at the meeting, from how I'm understanding that, it does seem to fly in the face of what we voted to do, to go to a library fund model. And in my estimation, what we're trying to do through all of this is get to a point where we are on that library fund basis, and where we have more control over, you know, what we ultimately decide the city needs for library services, which is a big job ahead of all of us on the board and ahead of us as a community. I think the community needs to be a big part of that, and then we respond to the community and, you know, to our feelings. So this, to me, is unacceptable. That's just me.
Well.
No, go ahead.
Notoriously speak out. I would agree, because I think we don't know what's happening with the city of Evanston and their general fund, which can change from year to year. There can, from my understanding, there can be things in the general fund that are in there now and that can be taken out, so that the whole basis is not
Can
solid.
be manipulated.
Well, that's your word.
That's my word.
Yeah, that's not my word, but it's not really a.
Solid.
I think it might have been an attempt to provide a floor, but I don't think it really does it, and I think it provides a basement rather than a floor. Maybe that's an analogy. And I think the citizens of Evanston, all the students I work with, and every old, young, and middle-aged person deserves more than having a basement library. If that makes any sense.
Do we have to have a reaction? What are you asking?
I'm asking for exactly what we're doing right now.
Just discussion.
No.
We're not voting on
It's
it.
not going out.
Because since it hasn't been discussed by city council, I don't think we have very much.
No, but I do think that, you know, that the mayor presented, I do think that it's certainly discussion worthy. And I think it
Yes, I
helps
do.
us all learn as we
I do.
continue these discussions.
Susan?
And Christopher and I were asked by the mayor that she did want some sense of feedback of what, she asked us at the meeting what our view was, and we said there's no way that we as two people, we needed to
Right.
have an open discussion. So that's the purpose
Right.
of this. And I think everybody's view is important. What we report back, I don't know in what form or how, but,
Well, the
This discussion
discussion
is
in the
being
minutes.
reported back in the draft minutes.
okay.
Yeah.
Like I told Alderman Burris
That
on Monday
this
night.
is
Right.
the, thank you.
Right.
Well, then I think people need to say what they think. And if they don't have an opinion, that's an opinion also.
I would think it'd be reflected in the minutes already that you just took. That the state has stipulates that one city wants a library, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. No, I already said it, I'm just reminding.
So the minutes will be
you.
blah, blah, blah. This does,
I
this,
can say it as many times as you want to hear it, but.
yes.
I wondered if there was an increase in revenues if the floor, if this idea of a floor would go up. I mean, I'm being
As a percentage of the general fund,
Yeah.
yes.
I don't think we have to worry about it.
Do you want to say that again?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't take that for myself. We don't have to worry about the general fund. It is, Lynette, I'm sorry.
No, I'm
Yes.
listening. I'm just listening.
It does link the library budget with the city's general fund. It is a very, and I do, and as I said on Monday night, I appreciate the recognition from Mayor Tisdall that the libraries are very underfunded. And, you know, I think that the spirit of this is I don't question. It comes from a positive place. But it is very, very different from state statute and the responsibility that is given local library boards. And we made a decision on August 4th, and we intend on working very closely with the city. We already are. And I think that the dialogue that began on Monday night, in a way, though there have been plenty of it happening beforehand in our forums and in our separate discussions with city officials, in our future discussions about chargeback and interfund transfers, I firmly believe in the path that this board took to a library fund, and I believe that is the most solid and sound model for the future of these libraries. We asked some questions about the general fund, what goes in, what goes out, do all tax revenues go into the general fund? Budget workshops are very elucidating in that regard. But I don't argue with where this comes from. It's everybody coming to some sort of solution to the library's chronic underfunding is on everybody's mind and is a concern of all citizens of Evanston. We've chosen a path that we think best secures that in the long term for the entire city. So that's my opinion. Is there any further discussion on the ordinance? I've been looking left and right all night, again, getting used to this room. I apologize again for my... No.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me ask a question. If they vote on this and it passes, we don't know.
We don't need to.
Yep.
I have no response to that at this time.
Be gentle.
No, I really, I just,
Tom?
I think regardless, we're going to set our budget. We're going to set our own budget, and then we will have to talk to the city.
Well, I'm going to have another discussion.
Can you have another meeting?
We did.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be next for discussion. But as long as we're still in new business and towards the end of this discussion, I want to, and this is not on the agenda, but it's not a motion, but I want to recognize Brooke Rucon, who's here before she leaves, who is a former trustee and was not at the August 4th meeting. So things have changed. Brooke was part of a trustee during the path that led us to the library fund the past several months, going back to the winter when all of this began. She's been a great colleague on this board, and you know, I have to apologize. I mean, you can see just how chaotic things are, all the work that we had to do. And we'll spare you a fancy resolution, but we do have something for you, so you stick around till the end. And you are very missed. You have very able replacements now, and I would say recognize Karen Terry as well. But I want to thank you very, very much and for your long service on this board.
I think she still deserves her ropes and her toes.
Now I'm getting warmed up. Now that we're just about done. But Donna brings up a very good point. We have the library fund model that we're working with and moving towards. We are timeframe in this process. And to that point, we checked this in the manual. We did this on August 4th as well. We did this in July. We do need to call another meeting before city budget deadlines so we can set our budget. And we have a lot of contacts now. And there will be many discussions. I'm sure we will be contacted by members of the community, members of wonderful people who supported this board. We have some really tough decisions to make, especially in the library fund model. So to that end, I'm calling in a friendly board. You can all rise up and throw me out of here if this does not work for you. But our next meeting on August 6th. I mean, why? I said August 6th earlier tonight. See? I'm slipping right back in this new room. It's done something to me. On October, if we had August 6th again, that would be a meeting. October 6th. And we'll post notice of that meeting fairly quickly. And I would suggest to this board, I'm calling the meeting sort of at the one thing I guess that the chair just gets to do, that we start earlier. Is anybody opposed to that?
To what?
That we start earlier.
Oh, great.
Chris, should we ask if people are going to be able to be here? Board members are going to be able to be here on that day. I mean, if we have too many people.
Okay, that's a good point. Well, these are not, we just need to agree on who meetings they don't have to be voted on, so we can, okay, that's fine. We sure do. We'll make sure we have a quorum.
I can too, but if we could find a date when everyone could be there, it would be better.
Okay.
Do that, you're Superman.
I would be Superman, but I think we should. Let's do that now. Since people that are here right now, they're going to be at this meeting. It would need to be sooner than August 6th, than October 6th.
Sharon suggested October 29th. I mean September 29th.
I'll be here
I will be.
at the ILA annual convention.
Here, yeah.
So
I'm out of town.
You're going.
I'm out of town, 27th
should
through
all
the
be there.
30th.
Let's think about the week of October 6th. That's a Wednesday night on the 6th.
I leave town the 7th, so.
What about the 4th? I'm leaving the 6th. What about
October 4th.
It's a Monday.
That's fine. I can make
Yes.
this.
Okay, sounds like.
Council meeting that night as well. I think there's a council
Yeah,
meeting.
but we don't have to.
No, it's not.
No, it's the week before.
Human Services. Rules of
Human
Human
Services.
Services Committee would be that.
But actually, the next council meeting is the 27th, which if I recall, the mayor said she wanted to have a vote on the 27th.
Like a vote on what?
On the ordinance.
On the ordinance,
September 27th?
that is correct. But that's either,
Yeah. That doesn't.
We have
we have to do our vote.
We have a lot to think about, discuss on that meeting. We have a lot to think about beforehand.
Christopher,
Yes.
September 27th, next Wednesday night.
Just a week from
A
tonight?
week from tonight.
Yep. September 22nd. Who can make it?
Is it a week? I can do, is that enough time to give a notice?
Yep. You mean for open meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a special meeting.
So it's a week.
You know, it's
I'm
not-
just throwing it out there.
Given
Because it's before-
given that we have to make some pretty hard decisions about this budget, that may allow flexibility if we need
Another.
yet another meeting.
And we can all have read this by then.
And I can see the excitement in everybody's face.
You can finish this in a week, right?
Easy.
Well, you don't have to read the part about the library districts, just about the library.
Sharon.
Well, fine. We'll read it. That's why we're up.
Yeah, this is an important process, and if we end up needing to go week to week, we will. So,
Yes, I can, you can.
go ahead, Ann.
This is me.
Yes,
September,
a week from tonight.
I should ask my wife.
A week for Claire.
22nd is good.
She's giving us a thumbs up.
I didn't know if I was,
Yeah.
September 22nd, and if the budget process takes 2, then it's gonna take 2, and I think that's good thinking, Gail. If nobody minds, we shouldn't mind, we're in a pretty serious situation. So,
That's what it said.
22nd, and let's start at 6:30.
6:30.
Yeah, some of us are coming from downtown.
Can you suggest an agenda or how we will proceed?
I think that we will hash that agenda out. We need to,
We'll have to post it.
yeah,
We need some numbers.
yeah.
We've got.
But the goal is we have a final, the goal of these is that we're going to have a final budget. So we have already been given,
No,
Yep. it's a process. So that means that we will place the agenda. In order to, it's a single issue, we'll work the agenda out, that will be posted. We'll have that posted within a couple of days. We'll try not to wait. I mean, we'll get this agenda posted. We know what we need to talk about and where we need to go leading up to October. So I thank everybody that came, members of support groups and all of the great public comment. This should be a very action-packed couple of weeks coming up. We need, technically, we don't need a motion for adjournment, you know. Well, that's changed.
We need a second, but there's no discussion.
That's right. There's no, unless somebody wants to discuss not adjourning. So, would somebody like to move to adjourn this meeting of the Evanston Public Library Board of Trustees?
I don't be happy to, whatever. I have to move that we adjourn this meeting at 10:10.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you.
We are adjourned.